Kawai CA701 has arrived with a new speaker system and updated set of samples. Let's see if it delivers. Let's get started with the CA701 right away. As we mentioned in our announcement video, there really isn't any change coming to the 701 versus where we were with the CA79. So this is the Grand Feel 3. This is an action that has let off. It's an action that is a triple sensor. A lot of people describe these kinds of actions as like high definition sensing type action. But the big difference between this action and most digital piano actions, and this is true of all of the CA series, is the fact that it's this full-length wood key inside the CA701. So if you're new to the digital piano world and you're actually just shopping for the first time, this is something that you'll want to be aware of and do some other comparisons because people who fall in love with these models, the action is often the very top of the list of items that's swung them in this direction. So the reason pivot length is such a big deal is that in acoustic pianos, the longer the pivot length, the better control you have at any point in the key, which is to say that this, as a proportion of the total length of the key, the smaller the percentage this is, the more the front of the key is going to feel the same as the back of the key as the middle of the key. So this is really about comfort and control. The longer that pivot length, the more it's going to feel uniform from the front to the back of the key. And so for advanced players who are going to make use of the full length of the key, this is a pretty big deal. The other thing that a longer pivot length can do, if the action is set up to take advantage of this, is we know that with levers, obviously, the longer the lever, the more force you're going to get on the other side of the lever. So this can translate into more power. And often with a larger piano you have a bigger hammer, and so you need that extra power. So all of that aside, the reason these CAs are so cool or so unique within the digital piano world is that pivot length. Now, because in these actions Kawai has chosen to essentially use an acoustic piano key, it also has the added benefit of reduced maintenance over time. We all know that a well-maintained acoustic piano, those original key sticks can last like 100 years, even if you wind up having to rebush them 1 or 2 times. And so you have a very low maintenance action. You have an action which really isn't trying to simulate the weight of a hammer or the length of a key. It literally just is. So that's always been a nice appeal to this. Now, the key surface on the CA series is pretty well the most premium key surface that Kawai makes for digital pianos. It's a micro-textured surface on the top, very similar to what they use on their grand pianos, as well as the black key. The black key has a little bit more texture to it. I actually personally prefer when the black key is slightly less textured and the white key is a little bit more textured. But this has definitely been a trend. I see this happening with a lot of the Yamaha models. A lot of the newer Kawai models have had this kind of increased texture on the top, which is actually the way it used to be on acoustic pianos when those were just raw ebony wood. So you're going to have these textured black and white keys. The keys are also really nicely cushioned, so if people are thinking about or worried about the mechanical sound that the instrument makes, for others in the room, this is something that you don't have to worry about with these actions. They're really, really well reinforced underneath, and they're using real felts. And in terms of the actual feel, if I were to describe it, well, let's do a little bit of playing. there's just an emotiveness to the instrument, and you know, we're going to be talking about the SKEX competition sample that's in there, but there is an expressiveness here that has definitely transcended what the CA79 was capable of. So beautiful job of mating the physical keyboard with the full touch curve of what's going on with that rendering engine inside there. So to sum up the action, we've got something that feels neither light nor soft. It's one of those rare moments where you're in front of an action and you actually forget it's there. I mean, quite simply, that's the nicest musical experience in front of a CA series that I've ever had. So now let's move on to piano sound, because that's really what is at the core of this. And once you get past the great action, that's what has to match that type of expressiveness for the instrument to be a success. This uses the SKEX rendering engine along with the XL Harmonic imaging. So basically you've got two kind of two tone engines working in conjunction. Somewhat similar to how you've got, like, say on a Roland, Supernatural engine driving the piano portion, and then you've got the regular kind of BMC chip that's rendering the rest of the samples. It's a similar approach over here, but the techniques used are a little bit different. So what they've done to achieve the first sample set, which is the SKEX rendering, and that was the same one on the CA79 and the 99 and the first generation of the Novus series. You've got the very first SKEX 9-foot concert grand, and they've placed microphones all around this instrument. They've got, from the player's perspective, they've got stereo microphones inside, you've got room mics, and all of this is mixed down into various combinations of tone that you can access by going into the rendering style. So you've got rendering classic, rendering brilliant, romantic, rich, vintage, and these are all going to be essentially multi-channel mixdowns of those different microphones. So you get this super immersive effect, and you particularly notice this if you are using a set of really high quality headphones, which I would definitely encourage anyone who is already owning this or considering to own this. It's kind of like a companion piece. If you don't have it, you're missing all kinds of cool audio information the Kawai's, you know, spitting out to you. And then that core sample set that we just talked about is then filtering through the regular harmonic imaging components, such as your resonance engines and some of those other artifacts that it then adds in. What's new about the 701 is that they have sampled a brand new SKEX-L, so that's like the second generation of the SKEX. And these instruments in real life, compared to the originals, had slightly thicker rims. They added hard rock maple laminations to the rims, and the upper mid character to the tone, especially on the attack and that first part of the sustain in the instrument, really started to come through and had a bit more of like a Hamburg Steinway-esque type of an experience. And so they've taken this second generation concert grand and they've prepped it as though it were going to go into a competition. I guess that's kind of where the name comes from. But they could have easily just renamed this kind of like second generation SKEX. But I guess this is a little catchier in terms of its lingo. You can really hear the differences between those two through the instrument, just in the same way that you can hear it in real life if you've got those two pianos side by side. It's pretty remarkable how noticeable the difference in character between the instruments is. And I just want to play that for you right now. So here is the original SKEX concert grand in its default setting. So Now here is the new competition one. Slightly different partials being emphasized. As I said, my ear hears it sort of in that upper mid range of the tone. A little more prominent, the sustain and the openness of the attack is a little bit different. The place that I notice it the most is actually in the top third of the piano. So that's the competition. That's the EX on identical settings. There's just sort of a more broad, a more colorful sound up there. So that's definitely something to look forward to if you are considering the 701 or the 901, because that's been an addition. Also a bit of a tip, because it took me a second to realize this, when you are navigating through, one tap to the left or the right will actually filter through the instruments that you're looking for. If you're trying to swipe, it's really easy to wind up going 2 or 3 past the one you're looking for, right? Like I just tried to swipe, and then it kind of goes a little bit bonkers. And if you're, again, just trying to, you have to be very, very careful. However, if all you do is tap, then there's no problem at all. Took me a second to figure that out. Anyway, a little tip for people at home. So whether you're in the rendering engine or not in the rendering engine, the resonance engines on this are very cool to play around with. It's going to give you string resonance, damper resonance, undampened string resonance, aliquot resonance, which is really just duplex resonance. I wish they'd use that, because aliquot, you know, in the acoustic piano world is kind of a slightly different thing. It's like refers to that 4th string that like Blutner uses and a few others. Anyway, aliquot resonance, aka duplex. And then when you're outside of the rendering engine, then you also get a few extra resonance engines added to that, such as cabinet resonance. And then your virtual technician is going to give you access to all of the other kind of artifacty sounds that add that extra little bit of authenticity. So this is going to be stuff like pedal noise and you know, how wide you want the lid open, key off noise, fallback noise, hammer delay. There's, I think, 19 different parameters and several sets of presets that you can assign to this. So the bottom line is, if you are a piano player and you are buying this primarily for the use as an acoustic piano replacement, which I assume you are, there are so many ways in which to nuke and tweak this to get it to behave the way it is. But like I said at the beginning, what I really love immediately about the 701 is, without having to do any of that, it's already delivering such a pristine, sensitive piano experience with no tweaking required to get something that feels great. Outside of those SKEX, there are also some really nicely captured acoustic pianos here to enjoy. Third one is the EX Concert Grand, which is actually an earlier version before the SK has sort of evolved from it, but still stands on its own as a really enjoyable tone, a really enjoyable experience. A little bit brighter and a little bit more forward on the treble attack. Something maybe that people would kind of characterize a little more as like a Yamaha sound. And then they've got the SK5, which is a 6'7". That's also captured here. That really nice kind of chamber sound. And then this is the K60 upright. Which works a lot, especially in kind of modern indie pop, indie rock. A lot of that upright tone seems to be very much in vogue, and they've done a nice job of that capture. Now let's move to the speaker system. What are we hearing all of these sounds through? And this has been one of the big moves from the 79 to the 701. You know, I think the addition of the Competition EX was a nice touch. There's been some circuitry changes, which were, you know, necessary because of some chip supplier issues, but it's gone in a positive direction. This is not something that's pulled back the fidelity. The tone has actually improved. But the speakers, to me, are kind of the star of the show when we're talking about this exact release, the 701 versus the 901 versus anything else that's using some of the same technologies. Because as I've mentioned, that's an area where I thought the 79 needed a bit of an improvement, and man oh man have we ever received it. So we're now on a 6 speaker system. So we've got 4 on the top, and then we've got 2 mains facing down. That's what's providing that nice big powerful bass. And that's all being driven by 2 55-watt amplifiers. So the wattage has come up, I believe, from the 79 from 100 to 110. But the balance between all the speakers, I think, has been much better executed. The EQ that they've applied to the speakers has been much better executed. And more than that, the angling and the baffling of those speakers is just doing such a nice job of sending the perfect amount of detail and high end to your ear, so you don't feel like it's getting lost in the room, or you're getting too much of a sort of a muddy, mid-rangey kind of sound, which off the shelf, I thought that's what the 79 was a little guilty of, and there were ways of compensating, as I've already mentioned, but this has totally resolved that entirely. And so at the end of the video, we're actually going to show you and let you listen to a quick clip. We're going to get a pair of Rode NT5s, and we're going to angle them exactly, you know, where my ears would be, so that you can get a sense of what these speakers are delivering. We're not going to do that right now, but trust me when I say that it has been a really welcome change. We're playing this at about 3/4 volume. It sounds open, you're hearing all of the detail, but nothing is harsh. And really nicely balanced as you start to transition through that mid-range. You know, you're starting to get some of that depth out of the bass, but there's no woofiness to the bass. There's also some opportunities along the front of the cabinet for a little bit extra kind of sympathetic resonance to get out. It's nothing really very dramatic. The majority of the tone really is coming out of those top speaker systems. As I said, very nice addition. They also talk about an improved low volume balance control. This isn't something I make a big deal of because mostly I don't advocate people playing their digital pianos on a low volume. If you have to be playing on a low volume, just put some headphones on and play at a regular volume, because even with the low volume compensation, it still winds up developing really bad technique. Not gonna, dance around that. Even though obviously the products have the volume knob on there for a reason, and there may be moments where you have to occasionally play down, and so the low volume control that's compensating for that is nice, but you don't want to get into a regular habit of doing that. So I don't make a big deal of that feature because I think it kind of promotes the idea that this can be a regular thing, and I really shouldn't be. We also talked about the headphone. This has its own discrete headphone amplifier and a lot of different digital processing tech that goes along with that. So there's some spatialization that you can use with the headphones, which is very, very cool, especially when you're using that with the rendering engine, because it really, it completely transports you into a three-dimensional space. Talk about creating a sound stage. It just does that at an unbelievable level. However, you do need, and I will say this again, you can't slap on a $50 set of headphones and get a particularly clear impression of this, because your brain is picking up on all of these very subtle nuances to kind of tell it that there's a bit of a spatial component here. And if the headphones aren't good enough to deliver that, then you're going to be sitting there going, well, this feature was kind of dumb. It needs to be something decent. We're not talking $3,000 crazy audiophile or higher, because I know they go even higher. But I would strongly consider investing something in between, say, $250 to $500 to go along with this. It's worth it. They've put the technology there that you're going to be able to extract value out of a headphone set at that price point. The display is another thing that they've improved. Or at least I think it's an improvement. They've sort of put an anti-glare on there, so it's a little bit of a matte finish, so it's not so reflective. Also, when the auto off is on in terms of the screen, you can now get rid of that backlight so that it completely disappears really from your reality. The general OS hasn't really changed, and when you match it to your phone, I don't know of any other company who's taken this particular approach, but then again, I don't know any other company who's done the whole like touch screen kind of Android computer as the source of control. Basically, the phone just emulates the same control panel on the piano. So when you're Bluetoothed in, it's like you've got the control panel and you're just swiping up and down, and it's a totally familiar interface. So that's kind of a nice feature. Now, in addition to all of the sound stuff that we've talked about, there is some other tech, and we should mention that. It does the basic stuff like layering, splitting. It's got an onboard metronome. It's got onboard rhythms as well. It also has four-hand mode, which is very handy for people who are going to be using this in a teaching setting. I know a lot of teachers who prefer to have the keyboard split and both halves be in exactly the same range. A ton of lesson book materials also included on there. I don't tend to focus on that, but for teachers who want to look at the list, you can go to their Kawai's website and see the full list. It's like dozens and dozens of these method books and repertoire books that are preloaded in. So this is all set up to be a really nice teaching tool or a teaching accessory. And finally, let's get to the connectivity on this instrument. This has both Bluetooth MIDI as well as Bluetooth audio, meaning you can stream Bluetooth to this instrument, take advantage of that great speaker system. Sounds good, I highly recommend it. This also has a USB recorder, and it's a USB audio recorder as well as MIDI, and you can record MP3 wave, but you can also overdub audio, which I don't believe is something that you could do on previous versions of the instrument. So if I'm not mistaken, that's actually been a bit of an upgrade, so you can, in a sense, simulate multi-track recording, as long as you don't have to go back and edit something from a previous take. So this has got discrete stereo 1/4-inch line outs, which I always love to see. It's got 2 headphone jack outs in the 2 different sizes. It also has an audio line in, that's 3.5 mil, with a volume adjuster, which is nice. So the 701 comes in 4 different finishes. You can get it in the satin white that you're seeing, the satin rosewood, the satin black, as well as the ebony polished black, and they all come with a matching bench. So now to finish the video off, we're actually going to use some of the demo modes on the instrument to give you a perfect side-by-side comparison of what the speakers are doing versus the line out. So we're going to play a couple of examples of the line out hitting you, and then we're going to set up those microphones that would be exactly at ear height to try and give you as close to a capture as what the speakers are giving us in here as possible so you can hear it at home. Thanks so much for watching this in-depth review of the CA701. We hope that it's been helpful. We have certainly enjoyed it here. Thank you so much to Kawai for delivering an awesome musical experience. I really enjoyed this one a lot. Take care. My name's Stu Harrison. We'll see you again here at Marion Pianos on YouTube.